There's only one man in this entire city capable of defrosting Mr. Freeze.
House of EdTech, episode 89. Support for this episode of the House of EdTech comes from my awesome supporters. Many thanks to Jeff Herb, Peggy George, Mark Grindell, Brent Warner, Dan Gallagher, and Jen Giffen. If you want to become an awesome supporter, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nessy. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. And welcome back inside the House of EdTech podcast. This is episode 89, and I've got a great episode for you. To get right to it, we've got the EdTech Thought, where I'm going to share a little bit about what I've learned recently about Maker Dads. I have a cool EdTech recommendation that is really fresh and will allow you to do some really creative things either for yourself or with your students. And of course, we've got the House of EdTech VIP. My featured content in this episode is a conversation I had late in the spring with Mike Marotta and Dr. Brian Friedlander, who are assistive technology specialists, gurus, and all-around nice guys. And I'm going to share my conversation that I had with them and obviously pass that along to you. I recently attended the South Brunswick Technology and Learning Conference, and I had the opportunity to present a session on your school or your district needs a podcast, and I had a great conversation with a lot of passionate educators who are interested in bringing podcasts into their classroom and also into their schools and districts that they work in. If you want to get the resources for that presentation, go to chrisnessy.com/school podcast, and you can get the Google slideshow and all the different recommendations for hardware, software that I think you can use to get started if you do want to get a podcast going in your classroom or school. The other thing I want to shout out is AJ Bianco's 10 Books in 10 Weeks Challenge. AJ is my other co-host on Podcast PD, and AJ, if you missed the last episode or you don't listen to Podcast PD, the podcast, and while we're at it, why don't you? Please go over to podcastpd.com/subscribe and check out that podcast. But anyway, AJ is reading 10 books in 10 weeks this summer. You can follow along with his hashtag 10BKS, 10WKS, and those 10s are ones and zeros. But head over to his website as well, ajbianco.me. The first book he's reading as I record this episode is Drive by Daniel Pink. And if you go to podcastpd.com/10, you can get the full list of books. And of course, it'll be on AJ's website as well. That's enough blabber for me here at the top of the episode. I'm going to come right back on the other side of this audio bumper, and we're going to do the EdTech Thought. The House of EdTech is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. So for this episode's EdTech Thought, on Friday, June 30th, I had the privilege of attending EdCamp Leader, and one of the sessions I attended was with Dr. Joe Mazza. Now, if you're not familiar with Joe Mazza, you need to be following him because he is really important in education and he's done some amazing things. So if you're not following Joe, you need to do that. There'll be a link to his Twitter handle in the show notes, which is at Joe_Mazza, and that's MAZZA. And Joe did a session driving almost 3 hours from where he lives in Philadelphia to Wyckoff, New Jersey, which is north New Jersey. And Joe did a session for Maker Dads. And when I saw that, I was like, I'm not sure what that is. I need to go check that out. So what Maker Dads is, for dads, grandparents, and really male role models who create life and learning experiences for their kids. And when I say kids, I don't mean our students, I mean our own kids. Statistics show high school and college students are entering the workforce in jobs relating to STEAM, science, technology, research, engineering, arts, and music, at an unprecedented pace. New research studies identify empathy as today's most sought-after leadership trait. Maker Dads is about supporting fathers everywhere to step up and create real-life, low-cost learning experiences for their kids from day one of their parenting careers. Some examples of the kind of high-tech opportunities Maker Dads will facilitate include coding, virtual reality fitness events, 3D printing rooted in literacy. Kids, together with their dads, will use evolving technologies to unpack how literacy, culture, empathy, humility, and science impact their world and are vital ingredients to success in and out of school. And it was a really good session, which spoke to all of these ideas, where we basically sat around a table and talked about what we do with our own kids. So we had to share, how many kids we have, boys, girls, whatever the case may be. So obviously I talked about Miles and Colton, and just talked about how I am facilitating learning opportunities for my boys in this maker environment, and I kind of go above and beyond what other people, may or may not be doing. I have Miles using real tools, and he's got real screwdrivers, hammers, clamps, and he's always with me in the other house of EdTech, the garage, and I want him to have skills. For example, and I shared this in the session, I found these faceplate covers in Home Depot that light up on plugs, either, with your two plugs or the rectangle cutout. I don't know the official terms. All I know is when I do this stuff, shut the electricity off. But anyway, so I found these faceplates, and I've seen them on Instagram being advertised and on Facebook, that you replace the faceplate of the outlet, and there are 3 LEDs on what could either be the bottom or top of the faceplate, and there's a sensor right on the faceplate. And just by putting this faceplate and it makes contact with your outlet, you then free up the 2 plugs and you have a nightlight that works the same way an automatic nightlight would work, in your bathroom or a hallway. And I just go into the idea of Maker Dads. It's just, I really, and I don't mean to stumble on my words, I really like the idea here. With Joe Mazza and Mike Hall, and Mike Hall is from strongfathers.com. And that's, dads playing an important role in their own kids' lives. And, I love my boys. If you're a longtime listener, obviously I love my boys and I do some cool stuff with them. But I'm really excited at, being a part of this Maker Dads Facebook group and following Maker Dads on Twitter to learn more about how I can create learning opportunities by upcycling and free cycling and just giving my boys the opportunity to be creative. And it's not just for dads. I mean, that's what their written mission is. But, if you're a mom or a grandma, work with your grandsons, your granddaughters, or your children, obviously. Danny Kennis sat in on the session, and she's got a 6-month-old. And she readily admitted, and sorry, Danny, if I wasn't allowed to say this, but she readily admitted that she was, between her and her husband, she's the nerdy one, quote unquote. So she feels it's on her shoulders to provide these opportunities for her son. And obviously he's only 6 months, but even then we were able to kind of toss out some ideas and, what could a 6-month-old do? That is using their hands and developing the motor skills that starts to foster the idea of making and creating. And ultimately, I think that that's the important thing, to give our own kids some of the same opportunities, if not more, or, it should be more because they're our own kids. So that's my little rambly thought on Maker Dads. Check them out on Twitter at Maker Dads. There's a Facebook group if you search for Maker Dads. And obviously, again, connect with Joe Mazza. And it was great to see Joe. And I'm going to be pushing him to work on a Maker Dads podcast. So be on the lookout for that because I'm going to help to make that happen. And that's my EdTech thought. Now it's time for the EdTech recommendation, and I'll break into my own speaking here, trying some new audio transitions here. So let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Send me on Twitter what your thoughts are on some of the new music here on the show. The old theme song's not going anywhere. And, of course, the old transition, it's still right here. See, here you go. But I don't need to, play the whole thing because we're already in the EdTech recommendation segment of this episode. And today I want to recommend the Book Creator app. Now, you might be familiar with this on the Apple iPad to create ebooks and digital content, but the Book Creator app is now available in your browser. If you go to app.bookcreator.com, you now have access to the Book Creator in Chrome. Book Creator is open-ended, creative, and cross-curriculum, and is one of the most popular iPad apps for teachers across the world, and as I just said, it's now available in Chrome. They developed a web-based version of Book Creator to bring simple ebook creation to even more students and teachers. And even if you're not a student or a teacher, you can still use this. If you're not in a position where you can use this with your kids, you could use Book Creator for yourself. This new version will allow you to create books on any device, and it will be as fully featured as the iPad version, plus more. With Book Creator, you can add text, images, drawings, shapes, audio, and video. You can create awesome comics with built-in comic templates. You can publish and share your books online with their new web-based reader. And you can work collaboratively and combine books from multiple authors, which is pretty sweet. And you can access all your books on any device. And that last one is huge. Imagine students or even yourself working on a book using their Chromebook at school and then getting home and grabbing their iPad to finish it. So unleash your creativity. Give students or yourself a blank canvas and a simple set of tools and see how Book Creator can be used. You can also join them on Twitter using hashtag BookCreator for a Twitter chat that takes place every other Thursday. And again, the website is app.bookcreator.com. That's my House of EdTech recommendation. Now it's time for the featured content of this episode. And as I said at the top of the show, I have a great conversation that I'm going to share with you that I had with Mike Marotta and Dr. Brian Friedlander. Without any further ado, let's hear the conversation with Mike and Brian. Welcome to the House of EdTech, Mike and Brian.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. And the Post-it note that Mike Marotta is using worked because he is going to speak second on most responses. So good job, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And speaking of appreciation, as you know, we really do this for the second time, and I don't mind telling people that because we had some technology issues here on the podcast, but we overcame them. I saw Mike recently at Tomorrow's Classrooms Today, so thank you here publicly for taking time to attend my session on Your School Needs a Podcast.
Yeah, no problem. It was great. I really enjoyed it. When I said to you during the session, I'm looking forward to introducing podcasts to the students I work with as a way for them to demonstrate their knowledge in a unique way. So the podcast I'm hoping is going to be something that engages them. So thank you.
I think it will definitely engage them. And of course, you have my support in anything you need that I can help with.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And as long as I'm throwing out accolades, Dr. Friedlander, Brian, as I'll call you, thank you, because you are the reason that I am a guest lecturer, adjunct professor at Rutgers University. So I am forever in your debt because I love doing that. I love teaching at the college level.
That's great. And I know you're so passionate about it. And when I heard about the opening, I knew you'd be the right person for the job. And that's really exciting. And, the other part, too, I just want to share is that, the reason why I knew you is because, we're all connected educators. And I try to explain to my students the power of Twitter And I actually use you as an example in terms of what happened when we are, connected and we can reach out and be part of my professional learning, community. It's great that we can help each other out in that regard.
And that same thing I'm translating to the kids that I work with at the university. So I guess that's like the circle of EdTech life. So, gentlemen, as we get into the meat of tonight's conversation, we're going to hit on special education, specifically assistive technology. So for my listener who is not familiar with that, they may just be thinking, oh, technology assists me. But we know that assistive technology is something different. So why don't we start there by saying, what is assistive technology?
So, assistive technology is really, any device, any support that, increases the functional capabilities of a student with a disability. So something like text-to-speech can be used for students that may have a reading disability because it supports them and helps them break through the difficulty they have with decoding words. And so there's lots of examples, and I'm sure Mike will give some too throughout this evening, that, again, it could be low tech. So, Mike was using a piece of low tech assistive technology, a sticky note, or it could be a pencil grip, or it can be a sophisticated, device that's dedicated to a particular function. But there's really a wide range. And I guess what's so exciting to me, I've been in the field for over 30 years now, is how, the mainstream technologies are now, can be used as assistive technologies, which means that it's more ubiquitous and the cost to enter is much lower.
Yeah, and I think just to echo what Brian says, that whole idea of this infusion of everyday technology has been such a seismic shift in our field of assistive technology and made things more attainable, more accessible to people, to give them an opportunity to be successful. They can have their needs met with straightforward technology they might already have in their backpack or have in their bag.
Well, since we brought up the idea of examples, you both have almost 100 years of experience between you.
Wait, we're not that old.
No, not how old you are. But, it was more than 50 years combined experience, so I rounded up. There you go. I think it lends credibility.
I like it.
Thank you.
A century of excellence. Not many people can say that, guys.
Yes,
that's right.
Excellence. I like that too. That sounds good.
Normally I would do this later in the conversation, but hey, let's start throwing out things that the special education teacher or the assistive technology specialist could be looking at. Or, as you defined it, it's going to help a student. Does that necessarily have to be a special education student, or is really all technology assistive? So what are some examples that are going to help students?
Well, I think, just things like, just on, smartphones today, they all have, word, completion. In the field, we use more sophisticated tools like word prediction, but for a lot of students, having the word completion is a great tool. And, things like, speech recognition. Now that's built into Google Docs, doesn't cost anything. Students can dictate with a high degree of efficiency and even navigate using their voice. Years ago, that would have, cost, a couple of $100, a lot of training, and now it's built in. And so, as Mike was saying, it really is, it's accessible to everyone. So if you have a disability or you don't, it's something that students can really, take advantage of. And the other technology, and then I'll let Mike jump in, that I've been exploring is, they've now been calling it this ambient technology, but things like Google Home and, Amazon Alexa, these that are, available that can read, Kindle books, can read audiobooks, get students information. I think, we're going to see that is really the next huge interface.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on some of the things that Brian mentioned, this idea of supporting the students that we're working with high incidence disabilities. So those are our students that have learning disabilities. So they're struggling perhaps with reading or writing. Using some of these tools built into our smartphones now and built into our tablets, or by simply using an app that's most times costs under $10, we're giving them quick, almost immediate access to print material they might not have been able to access in any other way, to have it read out loud to them, to help with comprehension, to help them with assignment completion. And 5 years ago, these were software programs that cost sometimes thousands of dollars. And now we're walking around with an app that's under $10 that performs that same function almost immediately, where the student can do it themselves, raising their independence, raising their ability to move through their day effectively, without a whole lot of help from someone else once they're trained on how to use it. So it's been really interesting to watch this progress, this technology. As
Mike was saying, I mean, one of the things that being a psychologist as well is a lot of the kids that Mike and I work with, they're just so frustrated in their learning. That a lot of them oftentimes have behavioral issues and have behavioral problems. And giving them these technologies makes them independent, lowers the frustration tolerance, and allows them to show their teachers that people are doing. And so that's the exciting part, for me, is that it not only gives them access to learning, but it has, it really has a domino effect on how they perceive themselves and their self-confidence.
Can you be a little more specific as to the student of, now 2017 versus some of the students you may have been working with, 15, 20 years ago? What are some of these big differences?
When I first, started out, I mean, most, Mike as well, we both primarily, we were working with a lot of students that, were, physically involved. Students that had difficulty accessing a mouse or a keyboard and needed, very specialized equipment, switches and interfaces and things of that sort. And then, as we kind of worked in the field, we started to work with students with learning disabilities. And so, the number of students with learning disabilities is huge. And so there was a big move from physical to sort of cognitive and now, learning disabilities. And, especially as schools have been demanding more of students with disabilities, I think assistive technology has, found a tremendous place to help these students, access more demanding, curriculums.
Yeah. And I think if we were to pinpoint that one instant, that starting point of this shift, it has to be mobile devices. It has to be tablets and smartphones. That just changed how we look at assistive technology for students and the availability of products. And a lot of times, and Brian and I have had these conversations multiple times about this idea of students not wanting to use technology because they don't want to appear different. Completely understandable. The technology of 7-10 years ago, by its design, it was customized, it was specialized, it wasn't typical technology. So it did have a different look. Now we have smartphones, we have tablets, we have Chromebooks. These are tools that everyone is using. It's not out of the ordinary to see a student open up any of those devices in a classroom. And so we've had this change in how technology is perceived by the students who need it. And that in itself has lent this whole idea of technology being more integrated into the students' environments.
And in addition, I mean, I think, as Mike was saying, certainly, tablets, the iPad, but, I think, the fact that, you have tools like the Chromebook that are so inexpensive that districts can, roll out hundreds of these devices because of the cost. It then, gives everyone a platform in which they can use inexpensive extensions to, promote learning. And I think that was a tipping point. Also, it's in the past, the hardware was so expensive that, schools didn't want to think about assistive technology. Now it's the other way. It's the hardware is so cheap, but there's still a tremendous need for people like Mike and I and our colleagues that do this because they need the knowledge to how to implement and use the hardware. And that's the exciting part for me is that so many more students are being served now.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what Brian said, it lends itself perfectly to this conversation about the second piece of assistive technology. It's not just the technology itself. It's not just the device, but it's also the service that goes with it, the training, the follow-up, the follow-along, the actual implementation of technology. And I really don't think that part of it is much different than what many other educators work through when they're integrating technology into their classroom. It's that idea of getting the stuff, getting the technology is only about halfway to the finish line. And most times that's probably not even halfway. You're about 40% there. It's how you integrate it in. It's all those steps you move through to successfully integrate it into all of the activities the student is doing in order for them to be successful. So just getting technology is never going to be the end of the line.
When you talk about integration, what are your strategies when you look to implement, whether it's new hardware or new software? What are some of the considerations that program directors or even the classroom teacher should take into account?
I think from my perspective, I think it's important to understand, certainly the student and their sort of learning profile, and also the environments that, the student will be, working in. And, I think I become much more, what is the school using? I mean, in some sense, it doesn't make sense for me to make a recommendation if the school is using one platform and I make a recommendation for a totally different one. So I'm looking to see that the integration is smooth, and also trying to determine, what is it that, the student needs to do that they're having, trouble doing without the technology, and then kind of linking, the various tools. So, trying to see if we can make it as seamless as possible, working on as a foundation, what's the school using in terms of the hardware, what kind of software do they have available to the students, so that, I can make this as a seamless experience as possible.
I think I would sum it up and say, don't start with the tech, end with the tech. Look at all those other pieces that Brian mentioned, that idea of the student and their abilities. What is it they're able to accomplish? Where are they going to be using technology, and the tasks that they need to accomplish? That's what drives the technology. And I agree with Brian. It's perfect when that can work into a larger goal of a school or a district. And I think what's nice about the way technology has kind of morphed in the past few years is that many of these tools cut across the platforms. So whether it's a Chrome tool or an iPad app or an Android app, these tools have similar functions and capabilities. So we can start to look, well, how were the needs of the student met by tools in the environment that are already there, and how can we ensure that they get that level of support that they need?
The correlation that came to mind for me was, it's similar to when we compose curriculum. It's not about a math program or the science textbook. You need to write the curriculum with the enduring understandings and the objectives, and curriculum is independent of any resource. The resources just support the curriculum. So the same, correct me if I'm wrong, the tech should support.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other part too is, I think that I understand what you said. The other part too is that I think a lot of people think that what we do is provide instructional technology, and it really isn't. It's really to help the students access the curriculum more effectively. So, our technology doesn't teach reading, but it provides, text to speech, or we can provide audio books so the student can, in a sense, read the books with their ears as opposed to having to decode. So it's important to, understand that, sort of delineation. And sometimes I think parents think that, what we provide is going to be instruction, and that's not really accurate.
Right. So it's not the same as if I was going to go into a classroom and work with the teacher on how to use a smartboard. You guys are coming into the classroom or working with teachers to get the tech in the hands of the students, so the students can use the tech to learn.
Well, the goal would be, so example, using the smartboard. I mean, the smartboard, maybe used, maybe we may teach the teacher how to export the notes to a PDF to give the student, because that student has difficulty with note taking. But, that's the difference. So we're always there to support the student in their learning, but we're not, in many cases, specific instructional. We don't have instructional goals in that, I'm going to teach them how to read. So we're not providing software that's going to teach that student how to decode. We're going to give them tools that will, with the tools enable them to listen to the text.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also finding those creative solutions that kind of bridge this IT and AT world and make sure that the student is able to be successful. And like Brian said, that goes back to that service piece, working with the teachers, working with the staff to ensure that they understand the reason why a student might be using a tool. We need to remind them this is a tool that is there as an accommodation to support this student. It's helping them accomplish the goals that you have set out within your curriculum, and then understanding how those two pieces might marry. So that idea of the smartboard, and Brian said with the notes, which is perfect, that idea of notes, how do those notes in an accessible form get to the student so the student can access them, understand the material, and complete the assignment? That's the assistive piece of it at the other end.
The other thing we want to talk about tonight, and again, this is something I'm not familiar with it, so you guys are going to teach me, and I'm going to sit right with the listener. Universal design for learning. And Mike, we flipped a coin. You're going to go first on this. So please explain. Please teach me.
All right. So this idea, and it's great. And I wrote myself a note as we were talking before, because you said something, Chris, about this idea of technology that's helping all students. And at its core, that's what you're looking at with universal design for learning. It's a different approach of looking at ways to change through these three principles of universal design for learning, the way that students receive instruction, interact with it, and then produce products. I know you don't say produce products, but I'm going to produce products at the end. So there's three principles of universal design for learning, which this all comes from the organization called CAST. So if the listeners are interested in going out and learning more about it, go to cast.org. They have a great website that really goes deep into UDL. But the core principles of UDL, the three of them, providing multiple means of engagement, providing multiple means of representation, providing multiple means of action and expression. Those are the three principles. So we'll kind of dive into one, two, or all three of them right now. But this idea that we start with engagement, it's looking for ways to adjust your goals, methods, materials, and assignments to engage all learners. And so this isn't, and some people confuse this and say this is a replacement for assistive technology. And this is certainly not a replacement for it. In fact, when we think about UDL is not a special ed thing. UDL is an everybody thing. It's an ed thing. And so I think that's important. And I wanted to make sure I got that out before I lose my train of thought and go off in the weeds. But this idea of engaging our students in the learning, finding ways to have them drawn into the learning and become vested in wanting to learn the information. When we think about the second principle, and you're getting a very broad stroke across them right now, but that second principle of representation talks about the idea of delivering materials to a student in multiple ways to engage all the different types of learners. Learners maybe are using print to move through materials. Maybe they're using audio. And when I said to you before about using the podcast, I was thinking of it in a UDL framework of this idea of offering up options for the students I work with in order to let them have choice of how they might demonstrate what they knew about a topic. So I was jumping to the third one, which was the action and expression, the idea of the students demonstrating their knowledge on a subject and doing that in any multiple ways. If we think about this idea of if students are always asked to complete a writing assignment at the end of a lesson, And if I don't write, or that's not my preferred method, I'm at a disadvantage as I move through. And so I start to check out, and then I start to not do my work, and then things snowball from there. But if we look to provide multiple options and give them paths that they can choose through their learning, we'll find that students will tend to move towards areas that work for them. And this is all students. This is not just special ed. This could be anybody. I have many times that I go into schools and we see we could be working. I know Brian will laugh when I tell the story. This idea of we could be working with a student and showing them how to use text to speech from a computer to read a screen aloud to them. So they're on a website and we set them up with something to read the screen out loud. And it never fails that in that process, I could turn my head and I have another student hovering over me and looking over and saying, what is that? How does that work? How come they have that? I'd like that. And again, it's just different modes and different preferred ways to interact with materials. And that's that idea of giving students choice.
That just sounds like it should be called, this is how you teach, whether it's working with special ed, general ed, kindergarteners, college students. Those three principles just seem like this is teaching and how you should teach. Now, in addition to cast.org, what are some of the other web resources that you guys, that it's your go-to, that other people, the listener, can conduct their own research and get more information about, whether it's UDL or assistive technology?
I guess, closing the gap.com is they have their annual conference is a good resource, especially if you subscribe to their digital magazine. ATIA.org, the Assistive Technology Industry Association, has some really good resources. Following folks like Mike and I on Twitter can be really helpful. And Mike, you can talk about your AT chat on Wednesdays.
That's exactly. I was waiting to jump in. I was following the direction of my Post-it note that said "Go second," and I was waiting. But this idea, and Brian and I connecting with the larger world of assistive technology, as Brian mentioned, every Wednesday night on Twitter at 8 p.m. Eastern, we do AT chat. So it's an assistive technology chat. And you have the opportunity to come and network with assistive technology people from all over the country. And we tackle different topics every week. We tend to stay in the world of AT for education, but any number of things. 2 weeks ago, we talked about math. Last week, we talked about professional learning. Do a search for the hashtag of AT chat and just read through. Find those people and connect with them, because there's a world of information out there, and it's so powerful.
Perhaps people are like me and like you guys, that they like to listen to content. Are you aware of any assistive technology-based podcast that the listener might be interested in checking out?
We do have one assistive technology podcast, kind of the granddaddy of AT podcasts, which is AT Tipscast, which our friend Chris Bouguet runs. He's an assistive technology person out of Virginia. And that has multiple episodes. I would check that out. It's a really great series of information. So I would say Chris is a good one to try.
I will be sure to include a link to that. And of course, all the different websites that we've talked about in the show notes for this episode. Besides that, maybe you guys will do a podcast, and off the air, I will work on pushing you guys to do that. You guys have also created a Chromebook guide and resource. Can you describe that, and also how the listener might be able to get their hands on that?
Mike and I collaborated, and we put together, I've been working with National Professional Resources Incorporated for probably about 20 years now, and it's a 6-page laminated guide, and it really kind of highlights, especially for the new teacher or educator or parent or student who's new to Chromebooks. It's a quick overview of sort of navigating Chromebooks and a lot of apps and tips and tricks for how it can be used in the classroom as an assistive technology. So it's one of those resources that you could. It's It's very dense. It's packed with a lot of great ideas. But in a matter of 15, 20 minutes, you can, learn about text to speech or learn about audiobooks and how to use them on a Chromebook. So if you're new to assistive technology, you're new to Chromebooks, it's a great resource. It's available for either Mike or I, or you can go to nprinc.org to order them, and they can be ordered with purchase orders as well.
Fantastic. And the other thing that we want to hit on tonight, Mike, you brought this to my attention. I'm aware of a lot of events that take place in New Jersey, but I was not aware of the New Jersey Assistive Technology Conference, which you let me know is going to be taking place in September. Can you talk a little bit about that conference and why people would attend it, should attend it, and how they can go about attending?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. As part of one of my various assistive technology jobs, I am also the director of the New Jersey Assistive Technology Act project, which is its mission is to connect New Jersey citizens with disabilities to services and technology. So it's to connect them to the assistive technology resources that are out there. So what we're going to do is in September, we're going to host what is hopefully the first of many assistive technology summits. And that's going to be on September 19th. It's going to be in Mercer County, New Jersey. So if you're local, I hope you'll come out. It's going to be assistive technology driven, assistive technology focused, but on all areas of assistive technology. So there'll be tracks of sessions on AT for education. There'll be sessions on AT for employment, and then also AT for community living. And so have kind of these tracks. We're very excited to have as our keynote speaker, we're going to have Bill Binko, who's started a volunteer group called AT Makers, where he connects with school STEM clubs and teaches them about assistive technology and how they could use the skills they're developing to help individuals in their community who need assistive technology devices. So Bill will be our keynote. I'm very excited about that. So if the listeners want more information, they can follow the web link. It's bit.ly/NJATS17. And that will take you to all the information.
That's awesome. Is this conference, is there a charge? Is it free to attend? What details do you have on that front?
Yeah, so there is a charge to attend. It's going to be for professionals. It's going to be $69 to attend. For family members, individuals with disabilities, it will be $19 to attend.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I assume that you'll both be presenting, or just Mike or Brian, are you involved in this?
Yes, I plan on presenting at the conference. I've marked it on my calendar.
Brian will be presenting at the conference. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
So, gentlemen, first, thank you for opening my eyes. So that means you've definitely opened the eyes of everybody else who is listening as well. I only had a limited understanding of assistive tech and, universal design. Again, I fall into that camp now of, like I said, that's what just teaching should be. And, I do that. Thank you so much for that. In addition to my learning, and I can reach out to you two anytime I want because we're connected. But for the person who's listening, who's a complete stranger to you, how can they reach out and connect and learn more from you guys?
I do have a pretty active blog at Assistive Tech. That's tek.blogspot.com. I tweet at Assistive Tech, TEK. So those would probably be the best ways to reach out to me and if you have questions or follow up, I'd be glad to help you out in that regard.
Yeah, and I would love to chat and connect with anybody and everybody. I'm game. Questions, comments, ideas, strategies. I can be reached on Twitter at MMATP. And then if you also want to email me, you can email me at mike@mmatp.com.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. This was a great conversation and, continued success. And I look forward to seeing you guys at more conferences here in New Jersey.